So in today's session, we are going to cover UML 2.5 modeling for business analysis. So this session is divided into certain parts. So today I would be covering three types of diagram in UML: your use case, class, and component or package diagram. Rest all diagram I would be covering in the other part of the UML session. So I have intentionally divided this session into multiple parts so that we better understand each and every diagram which are there in UML modeling. So before starting with the UML modeling, anyone have any sort of idea what it could be and what could be the significance of using UML in the context of business analysis? Anything you have read or you have already studied UML in your course curriculum anywhere?
It's like a graphical representation of any criteria, like um, model view framework, like as we design the criteria according to the model and the view. Like what will be the database and what will the view to the user and how they are connected on.
Okay. Any other thought process? Anyone?
It's basically a representation of the software components that the software developers are building.
Okay. So as a business analyst, we have different techniques and different artifacts for the software developers. Like we have business requirement document, functional spec document, then we have the UI prototypes, then we have the other process modeling stuff. Despite of having all these artifacts, why is there a need of UML? We have so many artifacts, right, for the software development team. Then why there is a need of UML at the first place? Did you get my question? I mean, we have so many artifacts as BA deliverables. Then why do we need UML? Is there a need for UML? Do you think so? And if you think there is a need of UML, why there is a need? Okay, okay. So essentially what happens is like in business analysis context, irrespective of how clear the requirements you write, with the help of your functional spec or your BRD or any XYZ documenting technique you adopt. UML essentially gives the reader of that document a pictorial representation of the behavioral of the system in the context of your modeling. Now, Unified Modeling Language, also known as UML, has the capability of depicting the component of a system in a pictorial manner. Or for that matter, you can also depict the user interaction, the behavior of the system in a pictorial manner. So as we all know, picture speaks more than 100 lines of words or 1,000 lines of words. So it gives a better comprehension to the user who is referring to your document. So you write, let's say, two paragraphs of statement, and irrespective of how clear the statements are, it's always good to include UML in your spec so that the user, if he is reading through that particular document, he immediately gets an idea about what these paragraphs or statements signifies, or what these paragraphs or statements make sense to the business. So UML is a unified language which is understood by everyone because the notations are pretty common and they are used in almost all the software projects that are existing in the IT industry landscape. So any project you consider, you would find UML diagram in any of the document more or less. Now, what is UML? So UML is essentially used to describe the system in detail. So in business requirement document, we tend to create a high level documentation where when we describe the system on a high level, on a perspective of a business stakeholder, or on a perspective of the high level functionalities that a system would have. But in order to describe the system in a detailed level or represent the system in a graphical or pictorial manner, we use UML. So this is the language which is easily understood by your end customers, your project manager, your system engineer, your developer, your tester, or the maintenance people who are there. So irrespective of whoever is the stakeholder, or if there are any other stakeholder in addition to the listed stakeholder over this slide deck, they are able to understand the UML language. Now we have certain views the stakeholder bring in a particular project. Now in and around a particular functionality, like we saw, there are different categories of requirement. We had domain requirements, we had our non-functional requirement, then we had a functional requirement, then we had a user requirement, system requirement. Now every stakeholder who are associated or who are owner of these requirements would be having a different perspective in and around those requirements. So how do you capture those perspective in and around those requirements? So the answer is UML. So UML essentially captures all the user perspectives, all the user interaction with the system and their viewpoints in a neat and efficient pictorial manner. So that's the reason why you as a business analyst would be using UML in your projects. Now there are different contexts when you are using UML diagrams in a project. So we have around 9 types of UML diagram in practice. So not all the 9 types of UML diagram you could use in a single project. So depending on the need of the project, you have to customize, or you should be able to identify which is the right set of diagrams you would be using in that particular project. So all the 9 diagrams you cannot use in a single project. So depending on the nature of the project, like it is a new product development project, or it's a maintenance project, or it is a feature addition project, depending on the nature of the project, you have to select which is the right UML diagram you have to use in this particular project. Now what are models in software industry? So model is the designing of software application before coding. So modeling is like whatever you are understanding, or whatever you understood from the requirement gathering sessions, or the chat session, or the interview brainstorming session. You go on modeling those inputs in different formats. Like you do database modeling, you do your UI modeling, then you do your process modeling, then you do your use case modeling. Similar way, UML is also one of the modeling technique that you are going to use in your requirement gathering activity. So they give the higher level of abstract of the system. They show the site maps, elevation, physical model, like at a very high level, how the system would look like, everything before coding. Now, after the development team has taken these artifacts into consideration into their development, they would understand how the system should behave, and accordingly, they would, what I would say, they would go on coding these aspects into the system which is under development. Now, what is UML? So, it's a general purpose modeling language. It helps us to specify, visualize, and document models of software system. Now, UML not only document the visual representation of the current system or the existing system that is currently under development, it also helps us to document the system which are outside of your current system. Let's say your system is having a payment gateway integration and it is interacting with a third party system like your PayPal or your Visa system, MasterCard system. In that context also, how the interaction would happen between these interfacing system, that is also which you could document with the help of UML diagram. Not only that, in between these two systems, how the messages are passed from one system, your current system, to the third party integration system, how the messages are passed, whether it's in XML format, whether it is in JSON format, or whether it is in any XYZ format. Those message passing mechanism can also be clearly documented with the help of UML. Whether your system is making a synchronous call to the other system or asynchronous call to the other system, what it is getting in response. In between, is there a filtering system which convert the data types from a different format to any other format? That is also you could document clearly with the help of UML. So what happens essentially in the IT systems is like, let's say you are developing a new application and which is on the latest technology. Now, latest technology would be having its own set of infrastructure, its own set of architecture, its own set of protocols. And whatever these set of architectures, protocol, or message passing mechanism would be there, that would be on the latest industry trend. Now, this system is integrated to a legacy system. Now, legacy system would be having a different architecture, different message handling mechanism. Now, the format of these two systems in which they communicate is highly likely that it would be different. So, you cannot send a message in XML format and expect the other system to send you a message or response back in XML format. It may send in any other format as well, depending on the configuration of that particular system, the architectural configuration of that particular system. So what you have to do additionally, you have to include an in-between layer which would essentially do the conversion. For example, your new system is sending information in XML and the legacy system is accepting information in JSON format. So the in-between filtration system, what it would do, it would convert your message from XML to JSON and then it would forward to legacy system. Now legacy system would respond to your message in JSON, but you only expect your message in your XML format. So the in-between system would convert the JSON format message to XML format. So this way you have to map different systems from a message passing context when you are working in an UML diagram. And UML diagram has different categories of diagram which would suffice these need of the system or any XYZ scenario. Now, when we see the UML, we have different perspective of a system. Like we have structural view, we have behavioral view, we have implementational view, and then we have environmental view. So in structural view, we have our class diagram, object diagram, and composite or package diagram. In behavioral view, we have our sequence diagram, communication diagram, state diagram, activity diagram, interaction and timing diagram. And then in implementation view, we have our component diagram and composite structure diagram. And eventually in the environmental view, we have our deployment diagram. Now each of these views correspond to a different need of the project. Like for structural view, we tend to interact more with the classes that are provided by the software infrastructure or the software that we are developing. The object diagram is also part of your structural view, wherein you would be defining how your system is structured. Like class is always a blueprint of a particular component within a particular system, basis on which you would derive certain objects, and those objects is something that you are going to use in your day-to-day operations wherever you need it. We would see in detail about classes and objects in a while. Then we have behavioral diagram, like the example which I gave you, the message passing mechanism. Those are part of your behavioral diagram and sequence diagram, and also to a certain extent timing diagram. So those would be um, uh, part of your behavioral view of a particular system. Then there would be implementation view. Now your system would be having different components or different modules within it. So how this module would look like and how this individual component would look like and how they would interact with each other in order to deliver a single piece of functionality. So that is something would be considered under implementation view. Then we have the deployment diagram wherein the environmental view is concerned. Whatever aspects would be associated with the deployment context, depending on the staging of environment, those all would be taken into consideration under environmental view. So in a particular system, when you see mapping a particular model or try to fit in UML into that particular system, you have to consider these four views: the structural view, the behavioral view, the implementation view, and the environmental view. Now, let us first understand what is object-oriented term. So, model in object-oriented term, we first have the classes and object concept. Now, let me explain you what are classes and what are objects. So, what would happen in a typical system? Everyone is able to see this notepad which I have opened up right now. Hello.
Yes.
Okay. So, let's say we have a particular class. We would take example of our project work. So we have a particular class as insured. Now in that particular class, we have different attributes like insured name, insured address, insured state, insured city, insured zip code, then insured phone number. So this is a blueprint of the class insured. This is the template of the class insured. So how I would be using this class in an what I would say in a context of a software, I would be creating an object of insured. So what would be the object of insured? So the object of insured would be name, then let's say that, then state would be then city would be that, then zip code would be this thing, and the phone number would be this thing. So what I have created essentially is an object of the class. Now, if I want to create one more insured object, what I would do, I would simply create a new set of information or simply add a new set of what I would say demographic information. So let me create a new set of object over here. Now, what happens essentially in a software system is like whenever you are entering the information in UI, now we have a screen wherein we capture these details like name, address, state, city, zip code, phone, and we enter these details. So behind the scene, what happens is like in a particular software system, there is already a template defined for this particular set of information or set of attributes, and that is tied to this particular class. Like we have a class insured, the insured class would be having this set of attributes inside it. Now, the moment we enter information via UI and it is saved in the database, a object is created for that particular insured class. So similarly, depending on the number of insured information we would be having in that particular system, that many number of objects exist in that particular system for insured class. Now same thing we can do for vehicle class, wherein we would write vehicle name, vehicle engine size, vehicle odometer reading, and so on. So depending on that, we would be having n number of class within a particular system. Now depending on how we want to use that particular class, we would be initiating or creating an object of that particular class. For example, I create a particular new class like vehicle with only two attributes, let's say. vehicle name and vehicle identification number, and I have created this particular vehicle object as Honda and created a VIN number for it. So I have entered these details. Now these two classes are template for these two objects. Now can I say that this object is similar to this object? No, it would never ever be. Objects are always independent in nature. So they would never ever be similar with, with each other. Now, when I am collecting information via UI, I am going through a set of processes. I am first entering information for insured, then vehicle details, then driver details, then XYZ details. So there are multiple number of information that I am collecting via a particular system. So how this thing are related to each other? Now there is an object, then there is an insured. Now I have a policy at a high level. Now this policy should have all the details of insured, vehicle, your driver details, and any XYZ number of class. So how they would be related to each other? So they would be related via a policy. So it would be having a unique identity number like policy number. So with this particular policy number, all of your child classes would be associated, and inside those child classes whatever objects you have created, all those objects would be associated. So in short, whenever you are creating a object of a particular policy class, all the underlying subclasses objects would be associated with that particular policy class. So policy 1 2 3 4, these are the details that you have collected. Policy XYZ, another set of these details would be created for and associated for that particular policy. So this way, behind the scene, things happen in a classes and object context. So this is what this particular object-oriented term talks about. Model consists of objects that interact by sending each other messages. And objects have things they know, attributes, and things they can do, behavior or operation. Now, there are certain things called as behavior and operation. Now we saw these are attributes of these two particular objects. Now I want to add certain behavior to it. For example, for class insured, once the information is entered, I would be using, if my need for a particular class is to just enter information, so I would be using an operation as add. If I want to edit that particular information which is already add, I would be associating the attribute, property, the operation as edit. If I want to delete it, I can do so. I would add the operations as delete. So every class would be having a set of operations and a set of attributes with it. So attributes would populate all this information for a particular object, and operation would allow the user to alter these details like adding, editing or deleting. So that is what it talks about, behavior or operation, how it would behave. So in a typical scenario, you could also alter the behavior of a class, not only for add, edit, delete, the CRUD operation. You could also alter it with different operations like calculating logic or executing a set of algorithm behind the scene. So depending on your needs, you have to identify and address a operation to a particular set of attributes in that particular class. Now the value of an object's attribute determines its state. So whatever values that you enter into a particular object's attributes like your first name, last name and any XYZ, that determines the state of that particular class. Now like I said, classes are templates or blueprints for objects. So there would only be one class, but there would be n number of objects of that particular class. So it wraps your attributes, data, the behavior, the methods, add, edit, delete, and eventually objects are instances of that particular classes. Now, there are certain other concepts like abstraction, encapsulation, inheritance, and polymorphism when it comes to object-oriented terms. Now, what are inheritance? Now, inheritance is like I shown you, there is a class policy, and under class policy there are other classes like class insured, class vehicle, all these classes. So essentially, insured is getting inherited from class policy. So class policy is the base class or the superclass, and class insured is the child class or the subclass. Now, when you are inheriting a particular class from a particular base class, you are also getting its properties and methods. For example, let's say I want to create this particular class vehicle as a subclass of class insured. So class vehicle has this set of properties. Now let me delete it. Now class vehicle has these two properties, vehicle name and vehicle VIN. Now when I inherit this particular class from class insured, what would be the updated number of properties it would be having? It would take all the attributes from class insured and all the operation from class insured. So the next time when I call class vehicle, since it is inherited from class insured, it would be having its own set of attributes and properties, plus additionally it would be having attributes and properties or operation from insured class. So this class, calling this particular class or initiating this particular class would give me its own properties and methods, plus whatever class it has been inherited from, that class attributes and method would also get inherited. So this particular thing is called as inheritance in object oriented context. Now then there is something called as encapsulation. Now what is encapsulation in this context? Now let's say when I am inheriting this particular vehicle from insured class, now there are certain attributes which are public in nature, some are protected in nature, and some are private in nature. Now this particular name, let's say it is public. So this public thing is always available in the attributes. Now there is something called as protected. Now protected is also inherited, but only to a friend class. So there is another concept of a friend class in object oriented context. If this particular class is your friend class, then only your address would be coming to this particular vehicle class. So let's not get into detail about that particular class. Now let's say I have two public attributes in this particular insured class. So when I inherit vehicle class from insured class, I won't be getting all the properties in this case. I would only be getting two properties which are public in nature. The protected the private properties I won't be getting. So that is what your encapsulation talks about. Only disclose details to the outside world when it is needed. To give you a very simple example of this encapsulation would be when let's say you are using a social media account like Facebook. So in Facebook, if you are logged in as a particular user and you go to a person's page whom you don't know and he is not your friend, you are only able to see certain demographic information about that person, like his profile picture and his name. The about section is not visible to you. The photos sections are not visible to you. Why it is not visible to you? Because that person has chosen to make his profile private from the other user. So essentially what he or she has done, she has encapsulated her profile. Only the relevant details are available, like the profile picture and the profile name. Rest all information is not available. If she want to include certain other information to expose to the outside world, like her selective pictures, 2 3 pictures, or her demographic details, if she has included or altered her profile, then only you would be able to see this detail. So in real practice also you could see encapsulation implemented in many places. So especially social media is a good example to verify how encapsulation has been implemented. Now abstraction I have already explained how classes and objects are created. Now then there is something called as polymorphism. Now this defines the mechanism of existing a particular class in different shape. For example, you have a particular class called as a particular shape. Okay. Now shape can be anything. It could be triangle, it could be rectangle, it could be polygon, or it could be trapezium, anything. So what it is doing is it is taking the shape as one single form, and all your relevant items like circle, your trapezium, your polygon, or XYZ, they are different forms of those shape. They are essentially your polymorphism. So in real practice, can you give me an example how the polymorphism is, have you ever seen polymorphism happening in real scenario? Think about it. You may find a solution. Okay. So remember I explained you that BAs are closely related to product owner. BA role is closely related to product owner. If you remember in agile session, I have explained you why it is so. Now, in a typical project, you are working as a business analyst and you are also working as a product owner. So essentially, your role is same, but depending on the need, your responsibilities differ. So that could be considered as an example of polymorphism. So your role is same, but your responsibilities differ depending on the context. Like sometimes you play a role of a product owner, sometimes you play a role of business analyst, sometimes you play a role of a team member or a particular what I would say scrum master. You write user story from a perspective of a scrum master, you write a user story from a perspective of a product owner, from a perspective of a business analyst. So what it is happening essentially, so you are essentially um, abiding to the polymorphism principle. Your role is same, but your responsibilities are different in that particular context. Okay, any questions, anyone so far? Basis on what we have covered. Okay, now let us explore UML diagrams. So in UML model, we have essentially these 9 types of diagram. We have class diagram, we have object diagram, we have component diagram or package diagram, then we have deployment diagram, activity, state chart, collaboration, sequence, and your use case diagram. Now out of these, use case diagram, state chart diagram, and activity diagram are considered as behavioral diagram. Class diagram, object diagram, component diagram, and deployment diagram are considered as structural diagram. And collaboration and sequence diagram are called as interaction diagram. So essentially, whenever you are dealing with a message passing system or any interface analysis system wherein you have to do a thorough interface analysis, like how the message is passed from one system to another, how the messages are responded from one system to another, you would be using sequence diagram or your collaboration diagram. Now, whenever you want to capture the requirements in and around the behavior of a system from a user context or from a stakeholder context or from a system context for that matter, you would be using this behavioral diagram like your use case diagram, state chart diagram, and activity diagram. Now, whenever you want to analyze a particular system from a structural context, in that way, you would be using class diagram, object diagram, component diagram, and development diagram. Now, can anyone tell me which set of diagram is more relevant to the development team from a development perspective? Is it interaction diagram, behavioral diagram, or structural diagram? Any thoughts? Which set of
Structural
diagram?
diagram.
Yes, structural diagram is more relevant to the development team because it has all the necessary information how the system would be behaving internally from a context of class, objects, components, and deployment. So development team would be very happy if you present these set of diagrams to them. And which set of diagram would be more beneficial for a business user perspective? Can anyone tell me?
Interaction.
Interactional.
Sorry, the voice just overlapped.
Interaction diagram.
No, it's use case diagram and straight
Oh,
chart and activity diagram, the behavioral diagram. The business users are more concerned about their perspective. So use case is something that would be more significant when it comes to business stakeholders or business users. They would be more interested in these three set of diagram or behavioral diagram. Now, from an architectural consideration, your sequence diagram and collaboration diagram would be more useful. The interaction diagram, wherein your technical architect or solution architect do a analysis in and around the architecture of that particular system, like how it would be interacting with other systems. Now, we will first see what is a use case diagram. Now, it's an outsider's view of a system. Like I said, the business stakeholders would be visualizing that particular use case diagram. It would give an overall view of the system, not the coding view, like in case of your this thing, structural diagram, but it would give you an overview of how the system would behave from an outside context, from a functional context. So that is the reason why business stakeholders would be more interested in your use case diagram. Secondly, it emphasizes on what a system does rather than how. Now, what and how are two different things a business analyst usually examines when he is essentially deployed to a particular business analysis engagement. Now, what part is something you could clearly document with the help of a use case? Like, what is this use case for? This use case is for this particular functionality, like adding a particular user or editing a particular user or modifying a particular user. So these kind of things you could add in a particular use case diagram. So that talks about what this particular functionality or the system, this use case would do in that particular system. Now, which diagram would show you how the system should be behaving? Those are essentially these diagrams, the class, object, component, and deployment diagram, this structural diagram, which are more relevant to your development team. Now, use case diagrams are a collection of scenarios. Like I said, in use case diagram, you could map the outside view of the system, like how the users, the typical different set of users would be coming into the system and how they would be interacting with that particular system. Now, the way they interact with those set of, with that particular system, their interaction way would be different. And necessarily the number of users and the types of users would be different. So use case would help us to identify the category of the user, how they would be what they would be doing in that particular system, under what circumstances or situation or scenario. So whatever you would be mapping in a particular use case, you would be doing with the help of an actor who interacts with the system. So actor could be anyone. In a particular insurance domain, it could be an agent, it could be an insured, it could be an underwriter. The actor could be anyone who is interacting with that particular insurance system. And the scenario is like what he is doing in that particular system, whether he is entering his policy information, whether he is getting a quote, whether he is issuing a particular policy. So what is that particular scenario? Now, when we write use case, so this use case diagram has different actors, use cases, and communication associated with it. Communication as in how they would be interacting with that particular system. Now, ultimately, these use cases would be taken up by your quality assurance people or the testing people, which would help them evaluate their test cases and their test plan. So, use case is a baseline document which they refer in and around creating their test cases and test plan strategy. Now, there are certain notations that you are going to use when you are creating a use case. Now, the use case name is signified by this oval circle over here. If you could see, there is an oval sign. Inside this particular oval sign, you would be writing your use case name. For example, what is this use case is for? Entering a policy information, editing a policy information, updating a policy information. So whatever is the use case name, you would be writing with this symbol. Then you would be having an actor. So actor would be having this human skeleton like symbol. So depending on who is the actor, you would be writing its name. Underwriter or agent or insured, who is the actor. Then you would be having a system boundary. Now what is system boundary? Now you have a particular system which you are developing. That is your existing system under which you are doing your business analysis activity. Now when your system is interacting with other system, so that point of time that other system goes out of your system boundary. So whatever is your context of analysis or whatever is the system that you are building in a particular what I would say project or whatever the project is intended for, that is your system boundary. Now any interaction that happens outside the boundary, you would have to indicate that in appropriate way, that this particular interaction, like calling a payment integration system or calling a particular sending the insurance paper via courier and integrating that logistic or courier system to your system, that is a different context. So your system would be generating the document. After generation of the document, how you are tracking the logistic part of it, that your insurance document are sent to the insured in a particular way, in a particular channel, that is something that has to be documented outside of your system boundary. So your system boundary is like generating the document. After that, taking physical copy and whatever XYZ activities you do, that is something that would fall outside your system boundary. Now then there is something called as association. So when you are linking a particular actor with a particular use case, you draw a single line. Now that line is called as association in use case modeling notation. Now then there is something called as extend. Now extend is essentially a relationship from an extension use case to a base use case, specifying how the behavior for the extension use case can be inserted into the behavior defined for the base use case. Now, for example, you are very new to the system and you are performing an operation in that particular system. For example, you are making a particular payment on a particular system, but you are unsure about how the system would work like. So what you would do, you may uh, search for additional information or additional help on that particular website, like how I should go about performing this operation. So what essentially happens here is, whatever your payment use case would be there, it would be extending your get help use case. So get help would be serving as your base use case, which would be giving necessary information around how to make payment via your system, and payment use case would essentially take care of how your payment is being made. So that is what your extend use case relationship are meant for in use case modeling. Then you have generalization. So a taxonomy generalization between a more general use case and a more specific use case. So if you have a use case which are more generic in nature, generic in nature means what I would say, um, the example would be like uh, okay, so you have a use case of a particular insured or a particular person who is intending to seek a policy. Now, in that particular insured, you have different use cases. Like vehicle use case you would be having, then you would be having his demographic use case, then you would be having his driver use case. So all of these use case would contribute to your insured use case. So essentially what you have done, you have generalized the three use case, your demographics, your vehicles, your drivers into that insured use case. So that is how you depict generalization, and it is denoted by a arrowhead with a line. Then comes your include relationship, wherein you have to include certain relationship from a base use case to an inclusion use case, specifying how the behavior for the inclusion use case is inserted into the behavior defined on the base use case. So like the example we saw, if there are some commonalities between two use case, what I would say, let's say we have a use case called as payments. Now payments would be having payment method, payment mode, and so on. Then we would be having different use cases like payment via PayPal, or payment via uh, your Stripe account, or payment via NEFT, or payment via electronic fund transfer. So in this mode of payment and the core payment, there are certain commonalities like payment method. So in that case, you could include this different use cases like PayPal payment, Stripe payment, EFT payment, or any XYZ payment to the whole payment use case, the generic payment use case. So this way you could include certain use case from there for your base use case. So that is denoted by your dotted lines with an arrowhead, and there would be a keyword written as include. Now then there are certain use cases like dependency. If a dependency relationship represents that a model element relies on another model element for specialization or for implementation, you could also use dependency use case. Then there is collaboration use case, which is denoted by these oval shape dotted line, and then there is realization use case, which is denoted by this dotted line. So these are some of the new to addition to the notation. Now this is an example of a use case relationship. So we have a use case named as make deposit. We have a use case named as make withdrawal. So there are two use cases that are in place, and both of these use case would trigger another use case, that is process transaction. Now when it comes to processing a particular transaction, irrespective of you are making a withdrawal or making a deposit to a particular bank or any XYZ organization, you are supposed to be a valid user. So what it would do when it is processing a transaction, it would essentially validate that particular user, whether the user who is under consideration for withdrawal or deposit of the amount from his bank account, whether he is a valid user of our bank or not, whether he is having all the necessary bank account details or not. So it would validate it, and basis on that it would record the outcome. And if there is a login, if there is a error in terms of validating that particular user, then this withdrawal and deposit transaction would not take place, and there would be an error which is thrown in that particular system, and we would be logging an error in a different use case. So essentially we are doing 5 use case over here. We are having a use case for making a withdrawal to the a particular bank account. A user who is having a bank account in that particular bank. Then we are having a use case to do a deposit for that particular user. Now when these two use cases are executed, a transaction is liable to happen. Now that transaction would always be under that banking system. Now this transaction would include additional use case to validate that particular user, whether for which we are doing a withdrawal or deposit whether it is a valid user or not. If it is not a valid user, then it would throw an error, for which there is another use case which would take care of that particular error handling mechanism. If it is a valid user, then the transaction would be successful. So what essentially process transaction is doing here, it is including another use case, validate user, under it. And what validate user is doing, it is extending the log error use case feature inside it. If it is a valid user, then the transaction would be processed. If it is an invalid user, then an error would be thrown, and that particular error would be logged in a particular system. So this way, when you define the use case or define what the system would do, you have to include and exclude certain use cases. So this is what the extend and include relationship talks about. In extend relationship, we use a part of a use case that is optional system behavior. Like in our example, the log error. This is an optional system behavior which we use. And it is a subflow which is executed only under certain condition. So the condition here was there, if it is an invalid user, then only it would execute. If it is a valid user, it won't execute. Then a set of behavior segment that may be inserted into a base use case. So we have used it in a validate user use case. Now what include talks about, the behavior of the inclusion use case is common to two or more use cases. So when we included this particular process transaction into validate use case, so it essentially validated whether the user is part of that banking system or not. If he is not, then do not process the transaction. Now this process transaction in return had two or more use cases like make withdrawal and deposit withdrawal. In order to process a transaction, you should be having use cases like withdrawal or deposit or check account statement. So that is what it talks about, two or more use cases. Then the result of the behavior that the inclusion use cases specified, not the behavior itself. It is important to the base use case. Now this is an example use case of a particular use case model. So we have, this is a sales order system. So we have a customer actor over here. We have a sales manager actor over here. So these are certain use cases that are happening in that particular sales order system. Now this square box which you are seeing, that is your system boundary, and the system name is as sales order system. Now this skeleton human symbols are called as actors. So customer is an actor and sales manager is an actor. Now what they are doing essentially over here. So customer is executing the first use case, that is checking order system in a sales order system. Now that includes logging into the system. Okay, in order to check the order status, he has to log in into the system. So that is one thing. After that, customer is also capable of placing the order in that particular system. So which again includes logging into the system. So there are certain extension points like insufficient credit limit if he is making a particular payment in that particular sales order system, and if his card or ATM card do not have the sufficient payment amount in that particular what I would say particular channel or a particular card. So there would be an insufficient processing that would happen. So essentially the order won't be placed. Now in order to verify whether the credit limit is sufficient or insufficient, we have another use case, that is process insufficient credit, whether there is an insufficient credit that is there in that particular system. So for that we have something called as extension point, wherein the use case, if it is referring to any other additional use case, would be denoted by this single horizontal line within the oval shape. And what is that extension point? It would be written over there. So it is, in this case, it is essentially extending the insufficient credit limit, which is calling the process insufficient credit use case. Now third activity which he could do is settling payment. Now settling payment can be done via two sub use cases, that is settling payment via check and settling payment via credit card. So this is a simple use case example which you could create or which you could visualize for a sales order system. Now similarly, sales manager is capable of executing this use case, that is processing insufficient credit. Okay, so next, when use case diagrams are helpful. So use case diagrams are helpful when we need to determine the requirements or features for a particular system. Then if we intend to communicate with clients, and thirdly, when we want to generate the test cases in around the use cases. So these are the three scenarios wherein we would be using the use case diagram. Okay, any questions, anyone so far? Okay, so this is one way of creating use cases with the help of diagram. There is one more way of documenting use cases with the help of or describing the use cases with the help of textual notation. For example, if we see this particular use case, we tend to have certain things in front of us, like the name of the use case, register a new user, brief description of the use case, who would be the actor of the use case, what are the precondition for that use case, what is the basic flow of that use case, what is the alternate flow of the use case, what is the exception flow of the use case, and what are the post condition of that use case. So name, as we know, we have to give the use case of a particular name. For example, in this case, we are registering a new user to this particular mobile app. Now, brief description is like what the use case would do. Like this use case is about registering a new user to this particular app. Now, who are the actor in this use case? Any user based in India willing to register to this particular app is the actor of that particular use case. So this actor can be anyone. It could be a supplier, it could be any XYZ person. There is no differentiation over here. Now, what are the precondition in order to register a new user? You should be having a valid phone number. You should be having an email address. You should not be an already registered user. And this particular app is already installed on your mobile. You should be having an active internet connection and your GPS is turned on. Only when all this precondition are met, your use case would execute. So you would be having a certain set of basic flow that the user is able to download this particular app. Once the app is installed and opened, the user has below option. He could do a registration via Facebook, Google Plus, or via email or mobile number. Then the user should be prompted for turning GPS to capture the exact location. Once authenticated, the app should ask the user for his whatever the app's functionality is. Now, what is an alternate flow then? So alternate flow is like the user can register for the app without turning on the GPS. In this case, the user would be asked to enter the location, area, or PIN code manually. If the internet or GPS is turned on, then the manual asking of the location won't happen. If it is off, then the location manually would be asked. That is an alternate flow. Then there would be an exception flow. Exception flow is like if something doesn't work in and around the basic flow and alternate flow, and you are unable to enter into the system, that is when the system is restricting you to enter into that particular functionality or that particular screen. So essentially what is happening? An exception or error is happening. So exception flows will be documented in this way. In this particular context, like the internet is turned off, the app is not responding due to improper installation, or the user has entered incorrect mobile number or incorrect email address. In these cases, exception flow would happen. And post condition is when all of these things are satisfied, what is the actual objective of this use case was. So that would be your post condition. For example, The objective of this use case was to register a new user. So the post condition would be the user should be able to register successfully and the user should be able to see the user management module, which was intended in this particular cases. So this is another way of documenting the use case in textual format. And this is the way how you document the use case, the use case in a pictorial format. So essentially you can document the use cases in two ways, pictorial way and describing it in textual way. Okay, any questions, anyone so far? Okay, let's take a break of 5 minutes. When I come back, I'll start with class diagram and component diagram. So the next set of diagram or the next diagram which we would see in UML context is the class diagram. So class diagram is basically an illustration of the relationships and the source code dependencies among the classes within an UML diagram. So what are this class diagram? So it essentially has the relationships, the association and the subtypes, and it has the structure, the attributes and the operation. So with the help of class diagram, we would now transition from what to how. In in the use case diagram, we essentially focused on the what part of the system. Now how part is something would be taken care in the class diagram. So if you see this particular diagram, a simple class, now this is an order class. Now order class would be having an order date and it would be having the shipped items, whether the items have been shipped or not. Then it would be having certain variables inside it. For example, calculation of the order or total order, the total tax, the order subtotal and total amount, the total weight of that particular order, the shipment date of that particular order, and the order weight and the order total. So these are the attributes that would be there in a particular order class. Now date and boolean are the properties, and these the brackets where you are seeing, these are the methods which would be operating in that particular class. Like if I want to cancel a particular order, so that's an operation you are performing on the order. If I want to calculate the subtotal of the order, you are operating doing an operation on the order, like calculation. If you want to calculate the tax for that particular order, you are doing a tax calculation. Like I already said, it's not only about adding, updating and deleting. Calculation, the other information like weight, then total order are also part of these particular operation when it comes to a particular class. So similarly, you would be having multiple class in a particular system. Like order is one example, then shipment class would be there, then there would be payment class, then there would be your tracking class, then there would be your customer class. So every class would be having a set of attributes and a set of operations associated with it. Now these operations are defined by the public, private and protected. For public, we denote the attributes or operation as plus. For private, we denote the attributes and operation as minus. And for protected, we denote the attribute and operation as hash, like you could see over here. So minus and minus is your private. Plus and plus is your public, that is publicly visible to everyone. Now, operations within a class. So operation is the implementation of the service, like calculating something or adding something, updating something, deleting something. They all would come under operations within a particular class. Now this would be having this structure. When we see everything as a whole, like we have a customer, we have an order, we have a payment, we have a credit, cash, check, order detail, item. So these are necessarily a class. Now in the upper section, name and address, these are your class properties or your attributes. And the other section like calculate tax, calculate total weight. These are your operations. So customer class would be having your name and address as the properties. Order class would be having date and statuses as their properties, and calculate tax, calculate total weight would be its operation, like what all operation can be performed on a particular order. Now, in between these generalization we see over here, there are certain elements that you could see as 1 dot dot 1, 0 dot dot star 1. Now, what are these things? So, these things are essentially your association within a class diagram. Like default is 1 to 1. One class is associated to another class. Then 0 to 1. Your no class is associated to one class, like 0 to more, 0 to infinite, then 1 or more, 1 to infinite, then n and m. So these are the necessary set of association that you would be having in a typical class diagram. So you could see over here 1 dot dot star, 0 dot dot star. So depending on the context of or the functionality of that particular class, you have to do an association with other classes within that particular system context. Now, associations are structural relationships. For example, an employee works for a company. So, employee has a relationship with a company. Now, a company has a number of offices. So, company has a relationship with offices. A company can have multiple number of offices. An employee can work only for one employee. So, the relationship is 1 to 1, and in the later case it is 1 to many. So this way you could define the relationship between the classes. So here you could see a person or an employee is working for one particular company. So this is an example of 1 to 1 association or 1 to 1 relationship. Now a company can have multiple offices. So company would be having a relationship 1 to many with the offices. Now then there are something called as reflexive association within the class diagram. For example, a class has an association to itself. Now this is a rare scenario, but it can happen. The example would be a directory may contain other directories. So it has an association to itself. So one directory can have multiple other directories or subdirectories. In return, one directory can have multiple files inside it. Now the navigation part is taken care of by this, what I would say, uh, this kind of bracket, like your angular kind of bracket. So if you want to show the navigability, for example, if customer credit rating is poor, then the order is prepaid. Okay, so if the customer rating is not that good, then we can take that order as prepaid. Prepaid as in he has to pay first, then only his order would be placed, since his rating is poor. If the customer rating is good, then the order could be postpaid, like cash on delivery. Once the order is delivered, the payment can be done. So that kind of thing can be depicted with this angular bracket over here, if there are any. So here you could see we are writing some code fragments, like if order.customer.credit rating is poor, then order.isPrepaid must be true. So essentially what we are doing here is we are describing more about this particular classes and their relationship. So we are mostly focusing on the how part rather than what part, which we covered in use cases context. Now these are some of the association, like car transport, how many number of person, 5, like car transport, infinite number of passengers, like car transport, one particular passenger. So we can define the association with the multiplicity symbol in that particular class diagram, depending on our needs. So this needs who would tell us? The business stakeholder, like how we would associate it, that particular business requirement with our needs. For example, an agent can create multiple policies. So the association would be one agent with multiple policies. Now an insured can have only one particular policy, and insured can get only one particular policy for a particular company, unless he had multiple amount of assets to insured. For example, if he is having more than 2 or 3 cars, he has the option that he could purchase one particular policy and include all of his assets, 2 3 cars, or he has the option he can create a one-to-one relationship, that one policy per car. So it depends on the business user and business context how they want to map this association. Now there is something called a superclass and subclass, like we already covered. Vehicle in this case is a superclass. Then inside vehicle would be your wind power vehicle, motor powered vehicle, land vehicle, water vehicle. These are your subclasses. Now this subclasses would be having additional contributing classes like truck, sailboat, which would be contributing for the overall functionality of the system. So essentially here what we derive is the parent-child relationship. Now there are certain characteristics of generalization. Now if someone asks you to generalize a particular class or relationship, so what and how you should go about it? You have to identify the common features concerning the behavior. Then you have to define this common feature. Then what is the aim of the behavior, and what is the generalization approach, like the bottom-up process which we saw, from truck to motor powered vehicle and land vehicle, from sailboat to wind power vehicle and water vehicle. So what is the bottom-up approach? And the superclass includes all the common properties of its subclass. So the superclass like vehicle, it includes all of the, these subclasses includes all of the properties of this subclasses, like wind powered vehicle, motor powered vehicle, land or water vehicle in this example. Now there is something called a specialization. So it is like to define a new class which is having a special appearance for an existing class, like the example which we saw, the notepad. So this, okay, I deleted it. So when I was explaining about the insured class and the vehicle class, so I included properties from insured class to vehicle class. So essentially what I have created a specialization part to it. I have included specialized property from insured class to the vehicle class. So that is what the specialization talks about, and it is a top-down process. In this particular example, this is from top to down. Now the subclass can have attributes and properties like we already saw, and subclass may redefine properties of its superclass, like we have already defined the properties of superclass, like the insured name and address. We have already defined it in our subclass, like the vehicle class, when we created a specialization class of it. Now there are certain constraints in a class diagram, like the basic constructs or the association, attributes and generalization do not specify your important constraint. Then if there are certain constraints, like we saw, we included it in the angle bracket. Like if the customer rating is poor, then the order has to be prepaid. If there are certain constraints in a particular business scenario, like if the insured credit score is less, then he should not be eligible for that particular insurance. So those constraints you would be mentioning in within this angle brackets when you are creating a class diagram. Now there is aggregation and then there is composition. Now association in which an object is part of a whole are your aggregation. Now computer system would be having your monitor, would be having your keyboard, would be having your mouse. So that is an aggregation. So here you would be having this kind of relationship with this diamond arrow. Now composition is a strong association in which a part can belong to only one whole. For example, a building can have one particular room. Then if there are another room, that would be having different room. So what the composition would be, the rooms would be composition. So they won't be different from each other, but they would be in parts and together they would be forming a building. But in aggregation, it would be having different parts. The parts won't be similar. In association case or the composition case, the parts are similar, but in aggregation case, the parts are not similar. It would be having monitor, keyboard, USB mouse, anything. But here, the rooms would be having similar in nature which would be part of your building. So that's the difference between these two. So any question around class diagrams, anyone? Okay. Now let's move on to the component or package diagram. Now to simplify this complex class diagram, we can group classes into packages. Now remember, when you are creating a package, now again we are focusing on the how part, not the what part. What part is your use cases. How part is your class diagram and package diagram. Now whenever we are creating a package diagram, we need to essentially include similar classes under them. Similar classes as in, for example, if I have a package of complete insured, so that's my package, insured class. Inside that insured class, I would be having insured demographic information, his vehicle details, his driver details class, then his what I would say, his location class, then his credit reporting class, everything. So together it's a package of insured class. So packages appear as rectangle with small tabs at the top, and the package name is on the tab or inside the rectangle. The dotted arrows are dependencies. So if we see a package diagram, it something looks like that. So accounting is a package, bank is a package, and then shipping, order, UI, customer database, stock database are again package. Now this particular accounting, then this particular ordering to accounting process, then shipping to stock database process, these has dependency on the bank. Without bank, your accounting, ordering to accounting cannot be accomplished, and your shipping to your stock database connection cannot be established. So there's a dependency between them. So whatever package would be there, it would be denoted in this tab, and you would be naming that particular package as per your business context or business need. So all your UI related functionality would be part of one particular package. All the functionalities related to ordering process or all the classes within the order process, like placing an order, adding an order, modifying an order, that would be having different classes. Now they all would be part of this ordering package. Now UI would be having how you are entering the information. All of the entering process of information would be handled by a particular class. Now they would go into this particular UI package or the component. So if you see from a holistic view, you could see that it is mapping the entire system. Now, and within the entire system, these are the different modules or different components within the system. Like your banking system has accounting, ordering, UI, customer database, stock database, and your shipping database. So this way you could create a high level view of your components that exist in a particular system boundary. So this is inside a rectangle box. So that's a boundary. Okay, any questions, anyone? Or we should start with our hands-on. Hello?
Yes,
Yeah. Any questions or we should start with the hands-on?
Yes, Sunil, you can start on hands-on.
Okay. So for that, I want you to register on this particular website, Lucidchart, if not registered already. So yesterday I had asked you to register on Glyphy. Now Glyphy has certain limitation, so I am asking you to register for Lucidchart. Sorry about that. So just sign it up. I think I'm already registered. I'll have to create a new account. Okay, everyone registered with the Lucidchart.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so here we would be needing a UML diagram. So I click on UML, so I get these kind of diagram. So we would be selecting the use case diagram for this basic use case diagram. So select on this basic use case diagram. Now whatever notations are relevant to the use case diagram, that would be loaded up for you. Now I already have a use case with me. I would show you how to create that particular use case. So I would go on new document, a blank use case. So I have a diagram with me already. It would be an online payment system diagram. So I would be needing these 5 actors and a system boundary. So it would be an online shopping system use case that I would be creating. I would be having a customer. Then there would be a service authentication wherein the system is triggering use itself and it is acting as a use case. It would be having an identity provider as a use case or as an actor. Then it would be having a credit payment service as an actor and PayPal another system as an actor. So remember, actor not necessarily be a physical person every time. It could also be a system in a context of use case. Now we would try to identify what are the typical use case when we are mapping around these actors for an online shopping system. Like we have view items a use case, make purchase, complete checkout and login as some of the use case. So for that, we would be needing this particular thing. Let's clear it out, all those things not needed. Now this thing is all cleared out. Now first I would be needing a system boundary. So I would be creating a system boundary over here. Now this is your online order system. So I would be naming it as online order system. Then I had 4 actors. This is my first actor. This is my second, third, fourth, fifth, Now I would be editing the actor name, like this is paper. This is your service integration. This is your customer. Just double click on the name. Now we have defined the system boundary, the name of the system, and we have defined these actors. So identity provider would be credit payment service would be an actor. So we have defined all the actors, we have defined the system boundary. Now we would be needing our use cases, that we typically have 4 use cases to represent in this particular online shopping system, like the view use case, make purchase, complete checkout, and login. So for use case, we have this particular symbol. So we will drag it. It's very easy to draw in this particular tool. So Glyphy doesn't provide the full functionality in order to draw this UML use case. So that's the reason why I am not showing you in Glyphy. So we have here view items. Make purchase use case. Complete checkout and your login. So we have defined all the use cases. Now we have to define the relationship. So first we will document the direct relationship that a customer would have. The customer would have a direct relationship with view items. Okay, so we have defined direct relationship with view items, the complete checkout, and login, wherever the customer would be having direct relationship. Similarly, the service authentication would be having direct relationship between these 3 items. We'll draw it in this way. Now we have to define the relationship between these two: identity provider with view items and identity provider with complete checkout. Okay, then we have credit payment service, which is having only one relationship with the checkout complete, and same thing goes with the PayPal as well. So this red dot which you are seeing, that is the place wherein you have to drag this line, else it would screw up this particular diagram. Then we have to include the include relationship, and wherever we see a relationship between these two use cases. So it has to include relationship, like make purchase and then view item, then make purchase and complete checkout. So there are two include relationship. So for include relationship, we must be having certain shapes over here. So we have defined our include relationship over here. So now our use case is ready for the development team or the end customer. Now after we have completed this use case, we can go to file, save as, or rather there is should be a download option. Download as whatever format we want. It is in the PNG format. Screen quality we have already verified. And click on the download button. So it would be generating a particular file for it. After that, you can open this particular file and your use case would look like this. After you have downloaded it, you can copy paste this use case in any of the requirement document you feel like. So this way you could create other use cases as well. For example, I have a sample for this particular class diagram as well. So in order to draw a class diagram, you would be having a set of uh, icons or a set of notification that you could use in a particular use cases. So class diagram essentially has these all notation. So you would be having notation like this thing, class. With the help of this particular notation, you should be able to create class diagram. And this is all that you would be needing. This toolkit is the all set of icons or the notations that you would be needing for a creation of a class diagram. Same goes to with the component diagram. So component diagram has all the necessary set of notification in this deployment category. So whichever category, whichever diagram you want to create, whether it's a use case, whether it's a class, whether it's a deployment or component diagram, you have the necessary set of notification already available with you. For example, let's draw a component diagram. I'm just clearing it out. So I have this example of your library system for which I want to draw a component diagram. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 components under it, and then there are certain this thing, what I would say, attributes under it. So first I would start with a component that is your library management system. Then I would be having a component called as book, which would be part of your library management system. Then system search and library member. After that, I would be having a package. The package name would be your transaction. Whether you have purchased a book, you have returned the book, or the book is on hold, whatever transaction you are doing in a typical library management system. After that, you would be having your fee part. What is the fee that you are paying for that particular library system? So now we have defined our components. Now we would be creating the relationships around the components. So the first relationship that we would be having, before that, I want to make this thing instead of straight, I would be having this sort of shape. That is the first thing that I would be doing. And my requirement over here is the dotted line. So I would be creating this dotted line for better context. Whatever the relationship you want to show, the dependent relationship, you can double click that line and create your dependent relationship. And the final key part. So this is how your deployment diagram looks like when you are creating with it. The same thing you have to follow. You could download it as PNG or whatever format you want. Click on download. Once it is downloaded, you can include that particular image in your respective document. So today we covered our deployment diagram, use case diagram, the class diagram. So this was the first part of your UML use cases. In the next session, we would be covering the rest 6 types of diagram with some hands-on.